Having high conversion rate doesn't automatically mean that your store is profitable. So there's multiple different metrics that you need to nail for long-term e-commerce success. And that's what we are going to cover on this video. I have prepared all the key metrics that you need to have and master, and then you are going to make a ton of cash with your Shopify store. Before I do that though, make sure to subscribe to this channel. I put out a ton of conversion rate optimization videos, especially for e-commerce, as well as different growth hacking type of videos for e-commerce as well. So we cover everything but traffic, fulfillment, etc. Now I'm going to use our e-commerce growth model for this explanation. And the first thing we are going to cover is the conversions. So this is about turning your website traffic into customers, which of course equals your conversion rate. So conversion rates, typically you'd find a low conversion rate on a high price site like this one, because it goes hand in hand with the price. You can't really expect to have a great conversion rate on a site like this that sells items for several $1,000s. Whereas on a site like this, Pura Vida, for example, where you can get bracelets for $10, $20, you can expect to have, of course, a lot higher of a conversion rate. But typically, when we talk about conversion rates, we do have some benchmarks. So couple percentage points on mobile tends to be pretty good. And then usually desktop conversion rate there tends to be about double the mobile. So if you are having, say, 4% on desktop, you can expect your mobile to be 50% to 40% from that 4%. Tablets in general should convert around 80 to 90% from desktop as well. But as we see from the statistics as well, there's a lot of finesse to it. So there's no real conversion rate that you should aim for. As you can see, for example, by industry, it can change a lot. Here on arts and crafts, according to this statistic at least, it's pretty high, whereas baby and child niche is very low. So there are huge differences between industries, huge differences between even different quarters. So you see, for example, here, Q4 generally quite a bit higher than the first quarter, for example. So there, if you see your conversion rate drop quarter over quarter, it might well be seasonal. So that's conversion rate. Let's jump into our second metric, which is the average order value. Now, obviously, we need to convert our visitors, but then also convert them with a high enough average order value that it makes sense. So converting the customers' order into something that's significant. So an examples here from one end of the spectrum to another one. So you also already saw a store that is selling several £1,000 worth of machinery. But here, a simple example, just compare Gucci, for example, to pretty much any other clothing store. And you can get that, of course, their average order value is going to be so much higher than your typical e-commerce store. And that way, even if their conversion rate is a tiny bit lower, or even if it were to be, which might not be the case, they would still do fairly well with these average order value prices. So comparing this to a store like this one, for example, where they are selling fairly cheap candy, a customer would have to buy a lot of this candy for this to be profitable. So here, a bit of a rule of thumb is to aim for at least $50 per order, because below this, it is just very difficult to make a profit. And yes, I do know that Amazon and Walmart sell things for very cheap, but you are not in a volume game with them. You cannot compete with their own absolute expertise. So here, generally, I recommend to aim for a little bit of higher average order value than you think you can get away with. So next up, let's look at the next metric. So far, we have looked at first-time visitors, converting them with a high average order value. Now, this is happening on the site itself, but definitely an important metric, especially if you want to buy traffic. But even if you don't, because technically you buy all your traffic, even if you do SEO or influencer marketing, etc., is the customer acquisition cost. So you're going to have new visitors that haven't bought before. You need to be able to bring them through a funnel that works in a way that you actually make a profit on that. So the customer acquisition cost cannot be that much higher, or it cannot be higher than the customer lifetime value. So here, usually brands are lucky if they are profitable on the first order, and then they hope oftentimes to make the profit back. More on that later on when we look at the other metrics. But generally, this is how it is. So e-commerce and consumer goods, they have a very low customer acquisition cost in general. Why is this? It's not because this is the easiest industry ever. It is because margins are thin, people are able to shop on price, and it's generally a commodity business. So here you have also relatively low average order values. So if you consider it compare to higher education and college, for example, like or financial services, they generally make more money per customer. So it makes sense for those industries to be more competed for and more of a market where it's really worthwhile to pay for that interested visitor. Then this is also a case that this varies a lot based on the industry. So here's some quick data here as well. So we kind of took a look at it already. But retail here, very minimal compared to different industries. I generally find this to be true, that it's very difficult to really measure and then understand how this customer acquisition cost is like in terms of profitability. It requires a little bit of in-depth data understanding, but it varies a lot per industry. So a small shop doing pay per click or Facebook advertising might pay around $20 per customer, whereas some others which are offering higher value products might have to pay a lot more. So generally this is the rule when it comes to customer acquisition costs. The businesses that can spend the most to acquire a customer win. So think of the funnel that we have talked about so far and how it relates to this particular sentence. So the better your funnel, the more you are able to spend to acquire a customer, meaning you can acquire more customers. This doesn't mean that you want to do that, but you can. So if you and your competitor are going head to head, you can crush them. So that's the idea. And here, in terms of this, we have talked about this a little bit, but customer lifetime value is generally calculated as the lifetime value multiplied by profit margin. So it's how much you are making from that customer, not only the revenue, but actual profit. So here, typically you will find that you have multiple segments of purchasers, and depending how big of segments you're going for or how granular you want to be with your segmentation, you might have 20% of very profitable customers, some very marginally profitable customers, or even non-profitable customers, and then a majority of your customers are just like pretty much average. Just notice here, time is one of the very important factors here. So what wins in e-commerce, I've heard said, is pressure over time, and it is getting that second, third, fourth order. So it's not a one order business. All right, let's jump back into the growth model. And here we have talked about the conversion rate, average order value, and now customer acquisition cost as well. So let's talk next about the returning customer rate. So this is maximizing the frequency of purchase, or at least getting them to order again. So you'd want to have people go through this loop as many times as possible. So here, repeat buyers are the ones that are going to be the most profitable for you. So people who have bought before, who come and buy again. Pretty simple. So returning customer rate. Let's look at a couple of examples here. So generally, revenue per sale tends to be higher the further along the purchase journey you go. So first one, you may not trust them that much. You are not that comfortable to risk it, etc. So revenue per sale tends to be pretty high, and cost per sale also are pretty high. Very razor thin margins, if at all. Then second sale, it's pretty much the opposite scenario. You have a higher revenue per sale, tiny bit higher at least, and massively lower cost per sale, and third, fourth as well. Now, realize that it never goes completely to zero. So you still work on this, you still keep on top of mind, you still apply that pressure over time, like we're talking about. Okay, another graph here. So understanding that same concept here on a little bit of a different data set. So we see that this is the average revenue per sale, but like generally in this data set goes like this. And then you have your number of sales made by this merchant on this sale. So you can see around a third of those orders that order one time become a second time customer, but after that it eases off in terms of the drop-offs. So here actually like it very much balances out over time. That's the interesting one. So that's the purchase frequency. Let's jump into the very last one. So here, let's jump back to the growth model. And now we are talking about customer lifetime value. So this is where you sort of make your money. And the key elements here in terms of customer lifetime value is minimizing the one-time buyers. So getting people to buy again. Maximizing that purchase frequency. So you have as many repeat buyers as possible going through this loop. As high of an average order value as possible. It doesn't really matter how much your conversion rate is in terms of like, they want to come to site every day, but only buy once a week. That's completely fine. Like it still works from a customer lifetime value perspective. So this is the value that the customers will contribute to your company over their entire lifetime before they die, so to say. So usually this is a 12 to 24 month metric, and you can segment people kind of like this, for example. So you have some that are very profitable for you, like your champions, the best of the best. And then you have a lost segment here. And here in this model, it's a recency frequency monetary model, RFM. And you have different segments here based on this. So you can actually do this with your own data, seeing how big these particular segments are, and get a little bit of an understanding where you might have underrepresentation in terms of these segments or overrepresentation in terms of these segments. So this is maximizing that money that people will spend on your products and services after you have acquired them. Of course, again, this massively depends on the business. So if you have a one product store, or say you're selling electric scooters, for example, then it's quite unlikely that people would need another one anytime soon. So they have their product and then they don't need it. On the other hand, if you're selling consumables, like vitamins, for example, then your customer lifetime value might be massive, because here people can actually just subscribe to it, and it sort of runs itself. So this is a trick here. Very difficult to get people to subscription, but if you can, the lifetime value is amazing generally. So just compare this to many other businesses. They're amazing. Another good example is Gymshark. So being able to build a brand around your store, and then you have people that are kind of like defaulting to that option. So just like maybe Nike tennis shoes could be a good example as well. So that's a good example of a high customer lifetime value business. An example of a low customer lifetime value business, I would go with something like this. It's a little bit of a toy, like bad build quality, cheap. You kind of get it because you're curious, and then you get tired of it. You definitely don't want to order anymore, and then you kind of be done with it. But this is also because you see they are trying to get people to order as much as possible, because they know that people are not going to order again. So they have to really discount it on that multiple order. So once you understand these metrics, you're going to be understanding your competition also a lot better. You can think where you are strong, where you are weak, and then get an idea there. So maybe you are like these people, and you would need to push it a little bit more because your lifetime value will always be low, for example. But start by converting your visitors into actual buyers first. There's a ton of great videos on this channel, and new ones coming up every Thursday. So just subscribe if you haven't already, like the like button if you haven't clicked it, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.